Hey, beautiful people. And if you jumped on here and you're going, John, what's going on with your hair? It's like, hey, that's the rigid pattern playing out on you, and just let that shit go. Just let the shit go that my hair is spiky right now. Now, in this video, I'm going to talk to you about how to leave with love. And this was inspired by a comment that was sent to me by a friend of mine and ex-client who just got into a relationship and it's broken down. And what's really important here is that when the survival patterns are still playing out in someone, that there can be a process of detachment from the person that you really love. And to give you some context in this relationship, so this man got with this woman, overseas, and she was everything to him. And they had this beautiful connection. They could feel all the love and all the intensity, and sex was mind blowing, and the conversation was fantastic. And then there was a dip point in the relationship. So what happens in the cycle of relationships is that the shadows come up, the lower self comes up, the unresolved childhood injuries and relationship injuries that can only be solved in a relationship come up. It doesn't matter how much shadow work and work that you've done solo. The test is when you are in a relationship, because that brings up the content, that brings up the attachment injuries to be exposed and repatterned in the body. Now, he asked me the question, like, John, I fucking love this woman. Like, how do I let go of her? Like, I just feel like I'm lost. Like, I feel like um, I was so consumed by this relationship. And this shows up in women too, especially if they've been with a narcissist or somebody else who's completely absorbed their life. And I've got some steps here that you can work through, and there'll be a combination of masculine and feminine strategies here, where the masculine side is much more about the strategy and the structure and the pragmatism, and the feminine structure is more about the flow and the ease and the grace that's available. Now, straight up, if you don't know what the 3, 6, and 9 month cycles are in a relationship, you'll be at a disadvantage. The same thing with, do you know what your negotiables and non-negotiables are in a relationship? If you don't know what those are, you're going to be at a disadvantage. So the first thing that you need to know is understand what those structures are and those strategies are in relationships. And this is beyond intellectually writing some stuff down. It really requires you to feel and reflect upon your experience of relationships. Maybe there's stuff that you saw in your mum and dad that you don't want to perpetuate. Maybe there's stuff that you see, behaviors that you've seen in relationships with your peers that you don't want to duplicate. Maybe there's stuff that you do want to duplicate that just fucking lights you up. Like, yeah, I have to have that in a relationship. This value has to be aligned in my relationships moving forward, right? So the first thing to leave with love is acknowledging just how deep the love was. And for certain survival strategies, and for those of you that don't know what the survival strategies are, there's a test that you can find off my Linktree that I've designed that helps you establish what your survival patterns are in relationships, right? And for some people, survival patterns, the easiest thing to do is just pull back and hold in all of their feelings. The other one is holding back, holding in and holding back. And these are survival strategies to avoid feeling the suffering and the pain, or expressing what's really alive in them. Probably might be because they want to avoid being the good guy, avoid being the bad guy, the bad girl in the relationship. So they might project the issue out onto you, like it's your fault the relationship ended. When really it's always you, it's always the individual. If you can give permission for the individual just to take ownership of, like, I don't want to be in a relationship with you. Like, you disgust me. Like, you said you're going to be this person and you're not, right? You haven't taken the necessary action, right? Which is a standard one. And for me, I'll speak to my experience in this too, where I was with a beautiful woman, and it was very apparent to me that we were not on the same trajectory. We're not on the same path. We did not have the same inner work dedication or the future vision for our lives. And I needed to end the relationship. And the important thing is to really grieve and feel the relationship. And it's even harder when you deeply love the person because it requires a depth of feeling and sharing and holding space for each other to actually let that relationship come to a natural end of its cycle, a natural end to the season of the relationship. It needs to go into a winter, that needs to go into death. And if you have a soggy relationship with death, this will also impact you too. And I speak a lot more about this in my school group, in my group sessions with them, and in my one-on-one work. But the most important thing here is to really get back on your own path. And a relationship, especially in the honeymoon period, like the first 3 months of a relationship, you can be so consumed by the relationship that you forget like your rituals and your disciplines and your pragmatic activities that you did that maintained your core self. And in the personality patterns, what the personality pattern that most gets absorbed in relationships is the merging pattern. The merging pattern. And I've got videos and content and a book that I recommend about this to go deeper into the patterns. The merging pattern is the one that loses themselves in relationships the most. And then when they end, they're the ones that try and cling on to the relationship the most. They're the ones that have this identity loss because they've enmeshed their identity in the relationship. And to just touch on it a little bit, this is an injury that is installed by an unhealthy mother, a mother who is not individuated, a mother who has not claimed her core identity, and is also in an enmeshed, most likely a codependent relationship with the father. Now, there might be a temptation to just try and just go cold turkey and stop obsessing. And sure, you can try that. And then the rumination will just come back in another way. This rumination of how good the relationship was because you're living off the nostalgia. You're feeding off the nostalgia of those high points in a relationship. And this can show up in relationships that have a trajectory of ending. Like you can feel they're on death's bed. And there can be this trying to rekindle this nostalgia, rekindle this, oh, how can we get back to this? And I mentioned at the start about the rigid injury, about my hair that's spiking up over here. And the rigid pattern is one of these 5 personality patterns. And they will try and avoid feeling the loss of the relationship because it's humiliating, especially if you made this relationship public, especially if you have kids together, especially if you're in like a church or some institution that shames or looks down upon people that relationships don't work or they're coming to the end of their cycle. And I talk more about this in my school group, like I mentioned before. And what's really important here when you want to leave with love is really honoring where the relationship got to. Really honor and confirm the conflicts that ended the relationship. For example, maybe a partner left you because you couldn't provide. Maybe you ran out of money. And there can be an opportunity here to either work together through this and acknowledge that, hey, we all have our down points, right? We all have our blind spots and our low points. And it's in the ability to come together and move forward that creates the new branch of that relationship. The temptation can be, especially if the partner has lots of relationship options, and if you're familiar with hypergamy, then women will do this, where they will choose someone who's much more a suitable suitor, more resources or more popularity or more fame, whatever the values that that woman holds, she will gravitate towards that naturally. And this is a part of what devotion means. This is gene key 29. If you're into the gene keys as well, I'm a huge fan of the gene keys for multiples of reasons. But the concept of moving from a half-hearted relationship to a committed relationship, to something that is devoted. And devotion is a completely different frequency. And when you leave with love, you are devoted to yourself. And this requires a connection to the core self. And to get a connection to the core self, you need to understand what your survival patterns are, which is the work that I take you through, if you're working with me one-on-one or in group. And you know what your survival patterns are, and there's armoring that you've created on your body that's both psychological and physical that will stop you from feeling the depths of what you need to feel. And usually underneath all of that, there can be a lot of grief and rage and conflations of feelings, where there can be like terror, for example, which is anger and fear, or rage and fear meshed together. And in order to feel terror, it requires multiples of people around you, or one person that's incredibly grounded, to be able to take you through that terror. Because terror is a fragmenting emotion, and it's usually installed pre-birth, like in the womb, or just after birth. It can also be installed from a father, by a father who's tyrannical. Or there's this could be heavy for you, so take a deep breath. Where they install the father has a murderous intent, and he basically wants to annihilate you energetically as a child. Like, you're humiliating him, you're questioning his authority. There's something that's there. So in order to move through terror, I mean, sometimes you can use plant medicines, can sometimes do it, but really you need another person, because in that moment your concept of humanity is being distorted. Your concept of humanity and a loving humanity is being betrayed and turned on its head. So doubling back to the de-armoring piece, I'm just going to share my screen here. Chrome tab, this one. All right, so fingers crossed this works. Let's go. Right, close that. Now, that's my tabs I just made for this video. Here we go. I love Canva. Such a useful piece of software. That's the one I want to get to. Great. Okay, so just to give you a physical example of what the de-armoring process looks like. So without connecting to your core self, all your relationships will suffer. Because through the core self, you establish a healthier relationship with self-love and union. You discover what union is within yourself and what you're looking for in another person. For example, if you keep choosing people that take away from your life, or you're someone who gets dissolved and lost in a relationship, then you're going to need someone that adds to your life. And to know what that feels like, you know what you are to be added to. Yeah? So you need to know what you are, your core self, so you can be added to. And if you have a gaping void in your core self, which the merging type has, they have a void in their, it's in their stomach area, like around their dantian. This is like I mentioned, it's installed by the mother. Can be karmic, can be epigenetic, but it's usually this lifetime and of the mother. You will not know who your core self is. So part of the process, like when I'm taking you through this, there's mixture of body work, sometimes roller gun. You can also go see somebody else who specializes in this. I'm not attached. Then I help you repattern your central nervous system. And to do that, I access the lower self. Get off there. I access the lower self. And the lower self is the part of you that holds the terror, it holds the rage, it holds all these primal parts of us that have helped us survive as a species. And if you don't know how to access the lower self, then I'm just going to stop sharing. Then you're not going to have the faculty and the dynamism to push through all of the blocks. You can understand all this stuff intellectually, but if you don't understand the concept of armoring, psychological and physical, and then the importance of the lower self, the primal part, then you're not going to be able to get the energy and the psychodynamic, which is the psychological, how our past has shaped our present and the trajectory of our future. You're not going to understand the mechanisms of how to move that through. And the temptation here is to avoid the work. You assume you can do it by yourself, and then you study and you do a whole bunch of other things to do. You do a whole bunch of like shadow work and journaling, and maybe take a few more plant medicine journeys or whatever. And then when you get into a relationship, again, you still need to cross that bridge. You still need to cross that inadequacy bridge of like, oh, I'm falling apart. I can't provide. I can't do this. I'm unable to do this. Right, cool. Here is when you come together in union and move forward together. And if you have not dealt with these injuries, it'll just show up. So, in summary, how to leave with love requires an understanding of yourself. It requires connecting back in with your core self, which involves like the methods that I've spoken about before, and a connection with something bigger than you. In the bottom corner of my thing, I had divinity, right? So, what are you really here for? What are you really here for? Because relationships that you can become really attached to can be a convenient distraction from what you're here to serve, what you're here to do. So, get back on your own train, and then you naturally find the people that will gravitate to you while you're on that train. And particularly for a man, the temptation is to get swept up in the relationship dynamic because it just feels so good. Because maybe your purpose is still in the initiation stages, and you're not getting that buzz that you get from serving or doing what it is that you're here to do versus being in a relationship. Because if you have that merging type injury, you're looking for a surrogate mother because the mother didn't fill you in a way that you needed to be filled. So you find it in a woman. You find it in a woman who's still at her maiden stage. She's not graduated into her mother stage or a later stage, like a Marga. You're still looking for another maiden unconsciously to save because you couldn't save your mother. So if you want to stop obsessing and ruminating over past relationships, you really need to get real with yourself and look at where you're going, what you are doing day to day, being able to intercept those thoughts of the rumination and be able to build a bigger future for yourself and focus on that. And once you can do that, and this is a muscle that you need to learn, because it's a good chance that if you're listening to this video, you had a family system that did not show you how to do this. It's a muscle that you learn, and keeping your heart open in the process is the important piece. So allowing yourself to feel what happened in the past, not getting stuck there, that's the difference. Once it starts tipping into a nostalgia and an obsession and a rumination, that's when you've got to take a deep breath, connect to your values and what you're here to do, and focus on the task at hand. Because in those moments of silence and boredom and frustration and purposelessness, that's Gene Key 28, purposelessness, you're going to stay in a loop, which is going to keep you stuck in the fantasy stage, stuck in the fantasy, which is Gene Key 41. So if you want to get more about and deeper into this information, I'll put links into my school group in the comments below. Send me a message if you actually want to work with me. I've got some spots coming up. Just inquire. All you can do is inquire. All you can do is ask. And if you're someone who's afraid to ask, that's a rejection thing, which is also part of the survival patterns. And the rigid in particular is a fear of rejection. So thank you for excusing my hair, and have an amazing day, an amazing week, an amazing month, an amazing rest of your life. And I'd love to be a part of creating that with you if that's something that you're interested in. All right, mad love. Bye.